What's going on, everybody? Taco Shooter here with finally with the Dark Dimension 6 best pick guide. What characters to bring into DD6 and what's going to help you get ahead. Joining me today is none other than Beta Ray Bill. As you were all aware, we've been doing a lot of testing the last few weeks, testing every possible scenario of a team. What's good, what's bad, and what's just bad out, just flat out horrible. We're not going to go over the flat out horrible, but we're going to give you the sort of a good, better, and best suggestion guide here. And looking forward to getting into this and getting that information out so everybody can really start putting together some solid planning options for what they're going to do for DD6. Now, as always, when it comes to this information, the most important thing that you're going to take into account is your individual roster. You know, a character at 7 red is going to be very different from a character at 2 red. A fully maxed out, yellow. When you max out a character's yellow stars, they're going to have significantly more impact than if they've only got 5 yellow stars, for example. So take your roster into account when making these decisions. What's best for the majority may not be best for everyone. So take that into account. And here we go. Starting up first is the DD6 non-trait guide. And the most important thing to hear is Apocalypse. And in particular, this is the big boy Apocalypse. The smaller Apocalypse is good. However, he's not going to have the sustain to really make an impact. So your focus for Dark Dimension 6 really needs to be getting that Apocalypse built up to as big as he can get currently. We know that there's more red stars coming for him soon, and we'll find out what that's going to be and how to get those. But for now, just need to focus on what's currently available. And the big Apoc is going to be significantly better than the little Apoc. And honestly, I don't think that the little Apoc is really even going to be usable. I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Beta? How do you think a little Apoc's going to perform in Dark Dimension 6? Because these characters are so overtuned.
Yeah, so I think the problem is that you're already dealing with on the large Apoc that when he does his ult and the subsequent follow-up hit, that's not enough to kill a character. So you're
Right.
already dealing with, for example, on the first node, you've got Kang as a real problem on the first wave. So your natural inclination is going to be to want to wait, ult on him, take him out, but you're not going to be able to do that. So the problem you're going to be facing with a little Apoc is that you don't have that ult coming up as soon as possible, and your damage is just not going to be enough that I think, like you said, sustain is going to be a real issue.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't think you can do it, but this is like every other tune. You can virtually use any tune in here that you want. It just ultimately comes down to how many times you're going to have to either back out and replay it, or how many times you're going to have to refresh or core to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as the characters that you bring in for opening up Dark Dimension 6, as you'll notice here, we actually didn't make a selection for you. Now we made a lot of suggestions for global, for cosmic, for city, for legendary, but when it comes to this, the best option is obviously going to be, to bring in your horseman characters and Nova or Kang or Vol. With 3 horseman characters. That's going to be the best possible option that you can bring in here. But at the end of the day, we just put a small note down here. Recommendation is as much global as you can, since that's the next set of missions. But that doesn't mean you should only do your global. Go by the character, the Gear 18 uniques that you have, and sort of base what you're going to do off of that. So for me, I brought in 1 city character, I brought in 1 cosmic character, and I brought in 3 global characters, right? I apologize. I brought in 2 cosmic, a city, and 2 global just to open up. And then for me, I'll get the additional global, and then the additional cosmic, and so on and so forth. So you're going to want to spread it out a little bit. And over off to the side, you'll notice where it says first mission, second mission. So these are the nodes themselves that you're going to go into. And these nodes, the characters drop in waves. And I know it's going to be pretty hard to see on here, but this guide is going to be available for you to download. I've got it in my Discord. I'll also put links below in the chat or in the description of the video where you can get this information. But you'll notice that some characters are bold with black and some characters are bold with red. And in particular, the focus of that is due to the size of these enemies, you really want to focus on the healers and cleansers as a priority, or anyone that's giving speed up. So those are the characters that are marked in black. Now, the characters that are in red are characters that you don't want to pair up. So, for example, on the second node here, there's potential to have 3 Ghost Riders on the field at the same time. That is far from ideal because Ghost Rider's passive ping is just absolutely demolishing you. So you want to get rid of the Ghost Riders as quickly as you can, or you're susceptible to just getting massively deleted every time you delete a character. And then you'll also notice that there's particular characters that for the past 3 years have been completely irrelevant. Like Crystal, for example, is highlighted here. Crystal is a monster at ridiculously massive levels. These characters are tuned beyond belief. And her doing her special where she's just smashing everybody, and her ult where she's again just hitting everybody with just ridiculous amounts of damage, she will absolutely solo your entire team if you're not careful. Anything about the non-trait that you want to add to with that, Beta?
Well, the other thing, using your crystal as an example, is as you notice through some of these, they cleverly kept some synergy. So you've got crystal and inhumans together in here, and so you're not just dealing with her enhanced stats, but you're also dealing with her healing them up, reducing speed bar, and so forth. So while she may be trash in our daily lives of no place to use her, in here she's absolutely not something to be messed with. So just continuing with what you said, we tried to highlight the ones that are debuffing or healing or just massive amounts of damage. Like, for example, you got to be careful with Black Bolt. You don't want him pinging your characters out, so you can't revive if you're bringing in a character that does do revives for you. That's nothing worse than having that happen. I know one node, I can't remember which one off the top of my head right now. Oh, it's wave 2 in the first mission. There's a Captain Marvel there that just hits with a massive amount of damage. And so that's why we tried to highlight sort of the characters, I think, to focus on. And then the other issue just to remember is these characters have massive health pools. We're talking 7, 8, 9, 10 million in health. And so you could sit here and just literally be whittling away. And if you don't focus on these healers, you're just wasting your time because they're going to heal up all the work that you did. So it's very important that you try to take these key characters out. The Shuris of the world, the Emmas of the world, etc. You just want to make sure that you're not, spending enormous amounts of time for naught.
Yeah, and the last thing to add to that, and we'll touch on it at the end of this video, is these waves don't all drop at once, and they drop at very specific times. And so we're going to talk about that at the very end of this video because there is a tool available to help you with that. So while you need to, this is a good guide to focus on characters to take out in particular, there's another guide that's already built into MarvelStrikeForce.com available for you, and we'll show you what that is and how to use it. So again, this is the first slide, the first infographic for the DD6 non-trait section, which does include the 2 missions. Moving on to the next section, which is global. So DD6 global. Oh God, Beta, you wanna take this away, because this was by far the hardest nodes, at least based on all of the runs that I watched you go through that we practiced on. I think you're the only person that can really give this the value that it needs.
Well, so the issue with global, we were talking about earlier today, is that there's a tremendous number of tunes that are global.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, as opposed to other modes like Cosmic, they're just not a lot of strong options. It's not that you can't get through these, and it's not that you can't get through them reasonably well. It's just that you just don't have the healing or the revives or the things like that that you can get out of the Mystic characters in Cosmic. So that's something to be cognizant of. For me personally, when I did my first run, Apoc is an absolute must here. Anybody that's going to try to do this without Apoc, it's not that you can't, but you'll probably be doing 30, 40, 50 hits to get through this.
Mhm.
Apoc is a critical one here. I myself did not have enough Mystic gear to bring Quicksilver in on my first run. Having done it on my second run, I highly encourage you to readjust your Mystic strategy and bring Quicksilver in if you can, because he does make a tremendous amount of difference in here. But as we were going through this, it's really all about, and this is going to be true with every mode, whether it's global, cosmic, or whatever. There's two or three tunes that are the main damage dealers, and then everything else that you bring is really playing a supporting role. So,
Mhm.
for example, here in global, we've got, if you can afford the gear, you've got Apoc and Quicksilver as your top two must-have characters, and then everything else is just supporting them, whether it's healing, whether it's speed up, whether it's stealth, whether it's stun, those kinds of things that really help keep the two main damage dealers from getting hurt. And so that's the important thing here. There's really three options. It's not that you can't use other tunes here, but we tried to look at sort of the best options in order to get through these nodes the most efficiently. Again, you have to take into account gear requirements. But at the top, we've got the best option really is Apoc with Quicksilver, and then supporting cast of Emma, Black Widow, and Captain Sam. You've got plenty of healing, speed up on top of speed up, charge mechanic removing, and then of course nothing better than Apoc's special for
Mhm.
getting immunity and heal up going, and then of course the ult. Again, caveat: just bear in mind you're going to be disappointed that his ult followed by the follow up hit does not kill tunes. You can get
If it's
close to
full
kill them.
health, yeah. If
Yeah,
it's at full health, he's not
if
going to
it's a
kill them.
full health. Yeah. A secondary option, which is not quite as good but works just as well, just be prepared that you're going to spend more time in each node or each mission going through it, is APOC with some combination of Rebirth. And so with Rebirth, obviously the two critical tunes are Captain Carter and Captain America.
Mhm.
And then we think you have some flexibility in terms of the remaining two characters that you want to bring alongside with them. They each have their own advantages. Again, it comes down to gear. If you're going to do a full rebirth plus APOC, then that's a tremendous bio
Big bio
requirement.
drain. Yeah.
So you may want to depending on your gear, rethink that strategy. But Agent Venom is really sort of I think a must-have is the third, and then it's really supplemented with either U.S. Agent, Winter Soldier, or if you don't want to do either of those two, then you could bring Captain Sam for additional speed ups or Black Widow as well.
Yeah, and
Uh,
Black Widow in particular. So, again, for those of you that aren't, because there's so many characters, it's hard to know every kit that's out there. Black Widow in particular is a relatively inexpensive character to bring. She's not in the meta conversation in general, but the caveat that I have to that is it's impossible to bring nothing but meta tunes. If you only bring meta tunes, you're going to bring 16 mystic characters and 8 bio characters and 2 or 3 mutants. Like that's the drain on the resources. So you've got to spread these resources out as much as you possibly can. And Black Widow is a valuable one because she's got huge damage at gear 18. A fully maxed out Black Widow at gear 18 is 125k damage, something like that. She's likely going to be over 100k regardless of where you have her ISO or anything else. Once you get her to the gear tier 18. And again, relatively inexpensive and a skill character. On top of that, she has synergy with her entire team, regardless of tags. So while she does automatically give, speed up and maybe defense up or something like that to infestation and 2 skill military and 2 avenger and 2 shield. She also has a 60% chance of giving speed up to all characters. That becomes important from the standpoint of a little bit of RNG, especially on that first wave. You're going to want to use her special right away, and if you don't get speed up on all 5 characters, you just back out of the node and restart. Remember, this isn't a race. There's no whoever finished first is irrelevant. That's already happened. Beta Ray Bill did it. Time to move on. Go at your own pace and play smart. Make sure that your cooldowns are always in a good place before you end before you allow your entire team to die.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And try to, I mean, that's a general rule of thumb, right? It's make sure your cooldowns are in a good spot before your team dies, or before the next waves die, or before you do the next mission, right? So that's a very important thing. And then the third option we gave you here is really what we'll call the good option. This is actually what I used on my first run. And again, that was because of just the heavy mystic requirements for what I used elsewhere. And so I actually had this whole plethora of tunes available, and so we were able to see the impact of that on a first run, and then with the subsequent testing we did for second and third runs, just to get some better ideas. It's not that these are bad. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. So again, Apoc is the core here. Emma, I think we've already talked about, as well as Captain Sam, but let's talk about the other 4 that are here. Gambit, I think, is a great viable option if Mutant is not an issue for you gear-wise. Obviously, his pings are huge. And so he definitely brings value here. The natural inclination, if Mystic Gear is not an issue for you, is to bring Weaver. The caveat that I always warn people about is Weaver is a great tune, and I love the charge mechanics there and being able to have your opponent tunes miss. The thing to remember, though, is you're facing waves of 10 tunes or more, and so the issue is that once Weaver's charges go up, with the amount of hits that the opposing side is doing, you're going to lose those charges very, very fast. And it feels like she has a target on her back. I don't know if it's hard-coded in the node somehow or not. So you just got to be careful that you don't get too disappointed that she may in fact not bring enough value. I'm not saying that she can't help, but just some cautionary tale on that. Doom is also another great option for the first mission. Where Doom starts to become a bit of a liability is actually on the third mission. The second mission to a lesser extent, because there's death pools there. But on the third mission, you've got death pools and you've got Archangel. And so having his summons almost starts to become a liability there. And even at Gear 18, 7 reds, ISO Blue 5, his ult still just doesn't do enough damage against the tunes that you're facing. So it's viable. If you've got tech and mystic gear that's available, it's certainly a viable option. I think he's a great option to upgrade anyway, but just some caution on that. Surprisingly, Titania at Gear 18, again, 7 reds, blue ISO 5, hits like a brick house.
Yeah.
And so she's not a bad option to have in here if you can keep her alive. She brings in the, the ability block and stun mechanics.
It's ability block and the ability to steal buffs.
Or steal, yeah. So,
which also speeds her up.
Bring some viability here if you can keep a supporting cast around her. Just don't expect any of these single shot tunes on the opposing side, but these are all definitely workable options. Again, it's not that tunes not listed on here couldn't work. Just be cognizant of 2 or 3 fundamental things. One is, what is their value outside of their natural game mode? So, for example, Gamma doesn't have a lot of value outside of War or Crucible when there was Gamma buffs in there. But you have to be careful about how much do you really want to continue to invest in something like Gamma. The other thing is, just the sustainability and the damage from other tunes that you might be compelled to want to bring in here. So. I know I've seen some people ask me, what about Ultron? Ultron had a rework. I think Ultron's problem again is going to be he's going to suffer from the same issues that Doom does here. So your usability of him is really limited to more the first mission than the other 2. So just some things to bear in mind. And then the last point about what you bring up is just really look at what are the game modes that are important to you, and so only try to invest in characters that are applicable to you beyond just DD6.
That was sort of again as much as you can.
Yeah, as much as you can. I mean, that was the problem we all had with the Apocalypse Saga, is that we were all forced into a path of 23 tunes, whether we wanted to or not. You've
Yeah.
got some agency or theory crafting here, so take advantage of that fact.
Yeah, and then again, for those of you that watched the live streams when we were doing all of this testing, a couple characters that pop into mind that didn't end up on the recommendation on the guide that we're putting out is like Nemesis and Dark Beast and some of a handful of other characters. And at the end of the day, it just becomes to where it can be a little bit too much. And when you're looking at Nemesis, that's a mutant character. Mutant gear is there's not as much need for mutant characters in this Dark Dimension run as there has been in the past. But at the same time, it doesn't mean there's not a need. There's a chance that you go into the legendary nodes taking a couple mutant characters. There's a chance that, well, not a chance, when you go through the legendary node with Apocalypse, where you're not where you're allowed to bring the horseman in, you're gonna want to bring in the rogue characters. So all of this is about managing resources and making sure you spread it out as much as you possibly can. So always keep that in mind with your planning. And the way that the Gear 18 pieces drop isn't evenly spread out.
Yep.
Maybe you're lucky and you get nothing but mutant gear in all of your stuff. Though in this with this particular Dark Dimension, it wouldn't necessarily be lucky. Lucky would be everything being mystic. All right, and again, you'll notice again that there are a lot of characters that are bold in black, and even more so, they're bold in red here. Second mission in particular, you've got on spawn, you're spawning with 2 Ghost Riders, and then you've got a potential to have multiple Cloak and Daggers, and as you're all aware, these tunes are way bigger than the ones that we have access to. A level 100 Gear 18 Cloak and Dagger with that's ridiculously maxed out and has random buffs built into them on top of their leveling. These characters hit different. You do not want to get stuck with a Cloak and Dagger on the field at the same time. Just FYI.
Or multiple cloaks.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I just realized I got to fix one that needs to be red there on that second wave or third wave. Yeah. But, the other thing before you get off the slide that I wanted to mention too is so there are other characters I know some other people have recommended or talked about, and I just want to caution people to be a little careful of the quote cheap characters, right? So I know some people are out there talking about Iron Fist World War II, for example, but he's a relatively cheap character to get in here, and he's kind of fun to play with in raids where invaders make sense. The thing you have to be careful about a character like Iron Fist World War II is that he's got a lot of synergy with his invaders team. So unless you're planning on bringing the rest of that team in, which of course you can't use Fury because he's legendary. If you're not planning on doing those, then a lot of his value goes away, right? So when you look at his special, for example, he heals self and all invaders for 20% of his health. He extends positive effects up to a maximum of 3 on self and all invader allies. Those kinds of things, if you're not bringing the other tunes in, you're not going to get the maximum value out of it. So I don't want to say they become cannon fodder, but essentially they're not going to perform the level that you would hope or expect that they would if you're used to using them in other modes like Doom or Incursion raids.
Yeah, and invaders in particular have various ability energy that they get from Fury critting and other characters taking certain turns. So you're not going to have that as much. Now, again, paired with Captain Sam, for example, Captain Sam does give energy out to all characters. The OG Cap America. So there are a few exceptions to the rule, but in general, you want to have as much synergy as possible when you're building these teams. But at the same time, smart synergy. Doing full teams doesn't always work. However, notable exception. Having a full rebirth combo or partially full rebirth combo with Apoc does yield relatively positive results. Um, it's just a bit of a slog of a fight because none of them do a lot of damage
Yep.
in comparison to what you're going against.
Yep.
All right, so moving on to DD6 Cosmic. Boy, so some mixed reviews on the people that have gone through and finished Dark Dimension 6, and I feel that the majority of those mixed reviews were due to some players not taking Vol in right away. Vol is extraordinarily OP when it comes to Dark Dimension. Her kit is made for this. Does massive percentage based damage, massive ability blocks to all. Up to 6 characters at a time. Puts trauma, revives two characters, and of course her. What's it called? Not vulnerable.
Exposed.
Expose, her expose mechanic, which really helps to delete waves of characters. She's just really, really special. Another one is Kang. Kang was initial recommendation, like top recommendation, and likely one of the first characters that you bring into DD6 for those first couple nodes, because he is a tech character, and there's not a lot of need for tech character upgrades here. So those 2 characters you can see, we automatically put as the recommended for Cosmic. And then after these 2, you got a lot of flexibility. Because there's a lot of Mystic characters and there's a lot of teams that you can utilize. And it's this good, better, best that you're looking at right here. Aside from the best, which again requires just a ridiculous amount of Mystic. The better and the good are both pretty interchangeable. Let's talk about your experience a little bit with Cosmic, Beta. I know you actually had a really good time doing it on your first run.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm in the camp of wow, Cosmic I think was by far the easiest nodes versus I know I've talked to some of the others that have already gone through that found Cosmic to be a lot harder. So I actually brought in what's listed on there as the best team, which is why I didn't have Mystic geared to do Quicksilver for the global. I just sort of knew part of me was suspicious that they were going to do something in these nodes to nerf Eternals, knowing that people would bring those. In fact, what they didn't do was do that. They just sort of highlighted the fact that the Dad brothers are actually completely useless anymore. So I would definitely not recommend those where in prior Dark Dimensions they were the hot ticket. But no, for me, bringing Vol and Dormammu in gave me an immense amount of healing and revives and everything that I needed to keep Kang and the Eternals doing all the damage. So if you have the gear and you want to have a super, super easy time in Cosmic, I couldn't recommend that combination any higher. With the only exception being once you complete your first run, throw Super Scroll in there and then you can have a blast. So that one to me is absolutely the best option. As you were saying earlier, when you get to the better and good, the core is still Vol and Kang.
Yeah.
And then realistically, and you could actually do Vol, Kang, and Dormammu, and then literally any other 2 tunes you want. So if you're willing to go invest that much into Mystic, those 3 really carry it, and then it's just any other 2 beyond that. But if you're going to conserve on the Dormammu side right now, then you have 2 options which are highly viable. One is using Moondragon and Phyla Vale. That's again they're playing supporting roles, keep removing buffs and keeping the team healed up. And then you really have flexibility on terms of a 5th tune. You could do Death Bowl, but then that's Mystic heavy again. You could do Kestrel, which is like you were saying earlier, as Tech tune, which you should have a more abundance to.
Yeah.
And then ironically, Ravager Stitcher is really not a bad option. Again, it's
He's
all about
dirt cheap.
providing. yeah, it's providing support for keeping
Yeah.
Kang and Vol going. So that's certainly an option. And then using some of the nowhere tunes is a third option. Again, if you're going to do it without Vol, a lot of these ideas or suggestions kind of fall apart. So Vol and Kang, just can't emphasize that enough. Those two are the linchpins of this.
Yeah.
Once you've got them done, then you could do some combination of the nowhere team, and I think you'll be fine.
All right. And then as far as um, these nodes actually played pretty clean. There wasn't notable issues. There's not anything in particular recommended to watch out for. At least in my opinion. I mean, there are some big characters that drop. You know, you've got Dooms that are going to drop. You've got Red Hulks that are going to drop. You've got, Captain Sam's that you've got to deal with. As we talked about, one of the reasons that he's so useful is because of that speed up mechanic. Well, the last thing you want is all of the other teams' ridiculously massive, ridiculously massive roster to speed up on their own as well. Much more manageable. No particular pairs that you have to just flat out watch out for. Just characters. Omega Red hits hard. These beefed up Omega Reds hit way, way harder. So keep that in mind. This I think is going to play out much smoother than the other nodes up to this point.
Yeah, again, depending on what you bring, but yeah,
Correct.
this one to me is really, I mean, they're all technically about control, right?
Yeah.
This one to me is very much about control. If you can stay in front of control on this, you can manage your way through this really effectively. I think really, like you said, the only major ones to watch out for is there's an apocalypse,
Yeah.
and so the key tunes like that, and just in general on any nodes, not just cosmic, you just got to watch out and make sure you don't let combination of tunes get together. So we've talked about what I always joke about the Hollow Notes, the Cloak and Daggers coming together,
Yeah.
but you got to watch out for Hela with multiple Zims, or
Yeah.
uh, getting Agatha with the rest of the gang and Darkhold together. You just got to watch out for those kinds of things. And if you can manage your waves along with your cooldowns, and then like all prior Dark Dimensions, the other one thing, which is sort of a general comment that I would add, is always try to figure out of a wave what is the least problematic tune and try to keep them up the longest as a way to manage your cooldowns or healing up or anything that you need to do before the next wave or mission comes down.
Right. Absolutely. And the notable thing that I want to point out about Cosmic is if you take a look at the better section, and you look at the Vol, and you look at the Kang, you look at Moondragon, Phyla, and then assuming you go with Kestrel or Stitcher, you've only utilized one Mystic character for Cosmic, and where that is going to significantly impact the decisions that you're making when it comes to building is going to be the next slide that we're going to now, which is the DD6 city infographic, where no matter what you do, you're going to need to bring Mystic in here. It's going to be the determining factor of what you bring is going to be specifically around how much Mystic gear you have available to you, or how patient you are to do this. Now, notably different with Dark Dimension 6 City compared to all the other nodes is there's not a absolute you have to do this or else character, which is not a good thing either, because City is extraordinarily underwhelming. And before everybody starts talking about, oh, well, we've got big time Spider-Man coming, Big Time Spider-Man is an extraordinarily slow release. So if you're looking into doing this in the next month or two, it's not going to be a viable option, because in 2 months at most you're going to be I don't know, maybe a 4-star in 2 months, maybe a 5-star if you're amongst the top rating teams, alliances in the game. So over a long period of time, he's going to be difficult to build up, because while yes, he's going to have a much better stats than most city options, if you don't have him built up big, he's not going to have huge stats. And then we still haven't been made aware on how he's going to be as far as red stars go. At this point, seeing as how we're already getting shards of him, I personally have a hard time believing he's going to be just in the red star orbs. That's just my personal belief. I don't have any information other than that right now. But as far as building a character strong enough to get through these city nodes, I don't think he's going to be a truly viable option. Now, going back to what the best DD6 city recommendations are, the first thing the first team that beta tested when he went into Dark Dimension 6 City initially was essentially the full New Warrior team with Spider-Man 2099. Or actually, was it with 2099 or was it with Shang-Chi?
No, it was with 2099.
Yeah, with 2099. And this was, I would say this was actually the biggest surprise of Dark Dimension 6, because everybody was terrified because there aren't any particularly overly strong and obvious choices, is how overtuned was City going to be. Because once upon a time, City was a monster, and then it became pretty easy, and then all of these characters sort of got power crept. And while we did get the new Warrior team to come out, Cloak and Dagger didn't get huge buffs. You know, they got some more synergies, but their base level powers and whatnot stayed relatively static. It was shockingly smooth.
Yeah.
I mean, watching it from my perspective, I was just like, is this actually super easy?
Yeah, it was. I mean, of all the nodes, I think that one, the two surprises for me were how difficult Global was and how easy City was.
Yeah.
And I was sort of dreading City, knowing that it was more unknown. Did I make the right choices coming into this? But, you know, again, I went Mystic heavy, which I don't recommend for most people. Having the full New Warriors with 2099 made it look like a cakewalk.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you can afford to do them, I think any of the choices of 2099 Squirrel Girl or Shang-Chi will pair incredibly nicely with them. So you've got some great choices there. I know some people are very adverse to bringing in anybody outside of Cloak and Dagger. I think you could also even go with a threesome out of that, whether it's Gwenpool or the other one, and some combination of the two. I think there's some flexibility there, but I think the message that we're trying to solidly convey here is that your better and your best options are with Cloak and Dagger at the core.
Yeah.
And then the rest is there to really help, again, keep them going. I personally had 2099 and loved it. Kind of like the way that I love using 2099 in Room 5 in Crucible. The fact that you can use his ult as often as possible and put slowdowns on everybody. It's just huge, you know. So I think there's some flexibility here. I think at the end of the day, though, the core is Cloak and Dagger, or if you're not going to go that way, then the core has really got to be Kingpin and Mr. Negative, and unfortunately, that's another Mystic. So there's no real way, as you were saying a little bit ago, to avoid Mystic here completely.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go the slimmest route on Mystic, then you go with the good option.
Yeah. And Kingpin and Mr. Negative. So I did a lot of DD5 runs. You know, I maxed out my border, and at the end of the day, the best team for Dark Dimension 5 that I came across was Cloak and Dagger, Kingpin, Mr. Negative, and Shang-Chi. That 5 was the absolute ultimate team to get through that. Now, with DD6, there's such a buff in these characters. They're so big. You can't get through the nodes nearly as fast. And so while you can still do that, you can still do Cloak and Dagger, Mr. Negative, Kingpin, and Shang-Chi. And Shang-Chi's unique because he does have a heal built. He does have a heal mechanic. He does have you know, his ult, which is a short cooldown, rewind, hits for massive damage. But it's while he's really great, at the end of the day, I feel like Spider-Man 2099 and Squirrel Girl sort of sort of put a bit of a leg up on what Shang-Chi can do, just from the standpoint of being able to heal more often with Squirrel Girl, being able to put those heal blocks from Squirrel Girl, being able to put slows on 10 characters at once, as well as defense down, particularly with 2099. And even Spider Woman has a uniqueness where she's just going to go across and hit nearly everybody, putting offense down. Ability blocked in one character and putting offense down on a whole bunch of folks. So there's a lot of uses here, and the notable mention, which we didn't put on the sheet here, yeah, Swarm's rework. All right, so Swarm is unique in the Infestation team in that his ult is not tied to Big Time Spider-Man. So his ult does massive damage to the team. Well, a good amount of damage to the team, and then massive damage to one character in particular because he does his ult and his special, and he's got significant reworked stats. He finally has armor. He's got more damage. He's got more health. He was shockingly good, but it still sort of hurts to say use Swarm.
Yeah, well, yeah, and the challenge is of course keeping him alive. So you gotta keep him from getting hit. But his rework stats, I mean, a 7 red Swarm, Gear 18, ISO Blue 5, his damage is 140k. I mean that's huge, right? So he's viable. You just gotta really control the nodes to make sure that he's not getting taken out.
Yeah.
And so I mean, some just general commentary. There are other options, obviously. Ghost Rider hits hard, but he's another Mystic, so I'm trying to avoid the Mystic crunch. I know I've had some people ask, well, what about She-Hulk throwing things back? Without the rest of her team, she's pretty weak sauce here.
Yeah.
The thing I would highly encourage people not to think about, based on prior Dark Dimensions, is things like Symbiotes or Web Warriors.
Yeah.
They have both been significantly power crept in here. So I just don't think they're going to be viable. There is an option maybe potentially with Jessica Jones being another bio, but if I had to choose, I think she would be way off the list for me.
Yeah.
You get the cleanse from her, but she's really not a damage dealer at all.
Yeah.
And so I think it's not that you can't, but again, looking out at maximizing your value in other game modes as well. And don't get me wrong, I love A-Force. I just don't use them outside of war. So.
Yeah. All right, and then moving along into the new legendary non-horseman section, and this one is not going to spend a lot of time on this because at the end of the day, it's pretty clean and self-explanatory. The majority of the legendary characters that are non-horsemen, outside of Nova, are all 2+ years old characters.
Yep.
Recently, we got a rework with Nick Fury. We got a relatively recent rework with Shuri, so she got a little bit more power into her. Omega Red was just well built from the get-go. So those 4 base characters right there are going to be a big starting point regardless of what you're looking at. As far as the best options available, notably the best options were Omega Red, Nova, Shuri, and then with the addition of Nick Fury and Adam Warlock. Now, Adam Warlock in particular, I think most people probably have him as a striker because with the Infinity Watch team, you've got your you've got your Nebula as a skirmisher, and then most likely the rest of that team as strikers. Adam Warlock has been power crept to the extent that he's not going to land any debuffs unless he's a skirmisher. He's just not. So keep that into mind because you are going to need, you're going to have Nova as a striker. Omega Red could probably go either way. You're probably going to have him as a striker because you want to be able to utilize that drain as much as possible. Shuri, most likely you'll have as a healer. She's the battery for all of these teams. Her ability to give energy to random characters, her heal block. She's just got a lot of really, really good stuff. But in particular, It's the defense up, and it's the energy, which is keeping her on the majority of teams that you're going to see going into DD6 non-horseman legendary section. Now, alternately, Jubilee does have a 60% or 70% blind chance. She does have a stun rewind. She does have the ability to spread debuffs, but she's super, super squishy. Magneto got a massive rework, does actually pretty well. His boosted stats from the Death Seed coming out have made an impact, but his cooldowns are still abysmally horrible. You're not going to be blinding all the time, so that's something to think about. Doc Ock, probably a reasonable selection. Back to being that there's not a lot of tech characters that you have to choose from anyway. So I think he's going to be a feasible selection for a lot of people. I mean, this section sort of speaks for itself. Obviously, the characters that are left off is because they're trash. Like, they're just not good. I think we even sort of hesitated on Jubilee because she's fallen so far.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with Jubilee is a couple things. One, that she's fallen far, and that two, other than some Greek raids, when you get closer to endgame, you're just not using the Astonishing X-Men anymore.
Yeah.
So her usability or her viability as far as pouring resources into her right now, given that she is another mutant, makes her a lesser desirable choice. Doc Ock is interesting because I don't have any basis for it either, but there's been some rumblings about some future potential Doc Ock Sin 6 rework. So, I'm always keen for things like that. But the problem with Legendary is, like you said, there's just really not a lot of great options outside of what we put here. And I would hate to see somebody invest in tunes that are underpowered, not used, out of date. And the other thing to consider is that you've got 2 more legendary nodes to go through. And if you start bringing in, if you're trying to go on the conservative side and hoping that you can leverage some of these into the last 2 nodes, you're not going to get anywhere with an Invisible Woman or a Star-Lord or an Ebony Maw, Black Bolt, Iron Man in the last 2 nodes at all. Yeah. You'll just be frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. And these nodes, when you do get to these nodes, I feel like they're going to go exactly how you think they're going to go. You're going to be able to get through them, and it's not going to feel particularly good. These characters are outclassed with from a power standpoint of what you're going against. But it's also not going to feel impossible unless you bring in Star-Lord, you bring in Invisible Woman, you bring in Black Bolt. You're gonna feel it. That's when you're gonna feel like you're just spinning your wheels and not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
And then as far as the very last node, DD6 Legendary, Apoc, and Horseman allowed. Technically it's DD6 Legendary plus Apocalypse, but we put the little Horseman out there because you are able to use the Horseman here. I think the majority of people think that they're going to be able to go in with Apoc and the Horseman that they not the Horseman, but the Legendary that they used on the previous non-Horseman Legendary node. And there's a bunch of Quicksilvers, and Quicksilver says, I don't play that. You remember Homie Don't Play That? What was that? In Living Color, Homie the Clown? Yeah. Like that's what Quicksilver's playing. He ain't playing around with your nonsense of bringing your entire non-Horseman Legendary. There's going to have to be some combination of that, at least in my opinion. Otherwise, you're going to be there for a long time.
I almost felt it's more like the other skit from In Living Color with was it Fireman Bill?
Fire Marshal Bill? Let me tell you something.
Yeah, let me show you something. I think if you go in with trying to go the conservative route, I mean, so everybody's experience is always going to be different based on your roster and what you bring in and all that. Yeah. But like we said earlier, I personally felt like Global was the hardest, and I felt like the Legendary non-Horseman was the second hardest. So I can't even imagine bringing in just the straight Legendary into this one without having the Horseman that I had. I think it's gonna be, Fire Marshal Bill saying, "Let me show you something," and he's gonna burn your tunes down. And the biggest character in here that I think is playing that role, like you said, is the Quicksilvers.
Yeah.
They are they are huge, they are fast, and they are hard to kill.
Yeah. And just when you think you kill them, they're going to summon a huge Scarlet Witch, and she's going to heal him back up, and then he's going to burn your house down again.
Yep.
Now, that being said, initially, Beta did go in with the full Horseman team in Apocalypse and learned very quickly that, and I guess not really surprisingly, but sort of surprisingly, like Archangel just didn't do very well.
Yeah, it almost felt like he was hard targeted was the problem. And so it's not that I don't know others that have gone through successfully with him. I do.
Yeah.
It just felt like on that first node, that first night when we were going through that, the first couple times we tried and ended up backing out,
Yeah.
he just wasn't surviving very long. And so dropped him for Nova and was able to get through these nodes much more successful. So I still think he's viable,
Yeah.
but based on my own experience, I sort of regretted upgrading him for this specifically because he's another mutant.
Yeah.
And, it just, how's that happening?
Random follow. Thank you, like
Yeah,
it.
that's weird. Anyway, so I think, as we've outlined here, the best options again are going to be the most expensive, which is
Yeah.
bringing Apoc with at least the 3 horsemen plus Nova or the 4 horsemen. If you need to adjust that down, obviously one step below that is, keep Red Hulk and Morgan because their value outweighs, I think, the others.
Yeah.
And then try to leverage, Nova and maybe Shuri for
Yeah.
the health benefits. And then if you peel that down one further, then obviously bring Apoc, Nova, and Shuri, and then, I think it's going to be a bit more of a struggle, but
Yeah.
you could do Fury and Omega Red with them. I'm not saying you won't get through it. I just, like we keep saying all along, just be prepared for probably more hits and more heals.
Yeah. Yeah. I think moral of the story is you're going to be slowly adding. If you don't bring up any of your horseman characters for this node, you're going to be slowly adding them one at a time until you finally get through each node, because this is going to be a slog without the horseman.
Yeah. The one thing I would add, if I can, real quick, is
Yeah.
with the horseman with Apoc, this felt like a much different experience than Dark Dimension 5 was.
Yeah.
I remember getting to the last Doom and the Fantastic Four bots on the first run, and how that just felt like, oh my God, am I ever going to get through this? And if you didn't tee up the wave before it, I think it was a Captain Marvel in the wave before it that was always sort of the indication of what's about to come. If you didn't manage your way through that, it was really challenging. With the right tunes here, I don't know about you because you were watching as I was going through it, but for me, it almost felt incredibly anticlimactic.
No, it
Right?
was
It was like
it was super fast. I mean,
it was fast, it was clean, it was, I'm not going to say easy, but it was manageable.
yeah.
You've got some big name tunes in these last waves that you're going to read and go, oh shoot, I've got a Dormammu I got to worry about, I've got a Morgan, I've got another Quicksilver, I've got a Red Hulk coming.
Yeah,
But
that Thanos, the
surprisingly,
million power Thanos.
yeah, and surprisingly, it just felt like they weren't a problem.
Yeah.
The only tune that I found to actually be a problem, because I ended up two-shotting that last node, was the Omega Red in that 5th wave.
Yeah. Yeah, Omega Red, well, he was boosted up. Like a lot of them were boosted up.
Well, he was boosted, and then also I think because I was more worried about the Quicksilver and the Morgan and the Dormammu and the Gambit and all of this stuff, that I just sort of went, yeah, I'll get to Omega Red when I do, that was a mistake.
Yeah. All right. So this brings us to the end of our Dark Dimension 6 guide. But before we get out of here, I want to showcase a few other items. So MarvelStrikeForce.com does have a DD6 planner that is available. So if you're logged into Marvel Strike Force and you click on your name and you go down to roster, that's going to bring you to this screen here. You click over here where it says Sync Roster. And you get the little roster sync up here. And then you go over to Dark Dimension Planner. And you can select any of the dark dimensions that you want to go through. And then you can see here, I've already got everything pre-selected on what I'm planning to bring through. And you can see where I am in my my planning and my gathering of materials. But it's just as simple as going down and clicking on the character that you want to bring up. And when you click on them, it'll bring them up here. So it's smooth, it's easy to easy to use. It's a wonderful tool. Big shout out to the MSF.GG team. You know, big shout out to Toxie and oh my God, I'm having a brain fart.
For what? I'm sorry.
For MSF.GG, it was Pim Toxie and Ty
Oh,
sorry.
Sanjay.
Yeah. So Toxie and Ty who are Scopely employees now, or Boundless employees now. They were the MSF.GG was bought by Scopely, and they implemented it into this. And then the second piece of information that I want to add here is also on, again, this is an MSF.GG original, on MarvelStrikeForce.com. If you go into game here, you can go to campaigns. You can go to maps. And when you go to maps, you have the ability to choose from any of the Age of Apocalypse maps, to Dark Dimension, to the raid maps, and everything else. But the Dark Dimension guide, if you select it, and then you open it up, it's got what your waves are, and on top of that, it has when the wave drops. So you'll notice here that the wording is sort of weird. It says drops when less than 3 enemies remain. So I found out some information, because technically the answer is this means drops when 2 characters remain. So when there's 2 characters left on wave 1, then this drops. Well, the reason that it says when less than is because these waves don't always drop simultaneously. So when this gets down to 2 characters, some or all of this will drop based on the node that you're in. Sometimes it's the whole wave, sometimes it's half a wave, and then when 2 more characters die, then the rest of the wave drops. Something along those lines. So, while this is a great tool to utilize, it doesn't mean you're going to get everything at once. With the exception of this one here, any of them that say drops when less than 1 enemy remains, that means when the entire wave is eliminated, then the entire wave will drop. So there's a few, but it's not noted which ones are which, and what the cutoff is, and what the characters are that drop. And we haven't put that much research to see if it's always the same, how it works out, if they drop at varying points. But just this is just a tool to use. It's not the ultimate. It's not going to give you all the information, but it gives you more information than you have by not utilizing it. So utilizing this, as well as the characters that we recommend focusing on in the Dark Dimension 6 infographic that we've put out here, will get you a long way. And a big shout out to Ty and to Toxie for keeping that updated as always, and just giving us an amazing tool to utilize when we're doing this. That's it. If you like the video, be sure to like and subscribe. Again, big, massive shout out and thank you for all your help with this beta. And, congratulations again on being the first person through Dark Dimension 6. You are the best, my friend. Anything you'd like to close out with?
No, I think you hit it, other than just re-emphasizing use the MSF-GG tool, because we didn't want to recreate that here. So as you were showing in terms of, how much gear you need on each character, that's your best resource for it. It's great because not only does it tell you what you need, but it also takes into account your inventory of what you currently have, so that you can see how much more you need to accumulate. So that was incredibly invaluable for me when I was doing my planning.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you again, and hope everybody enjoys this video. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe, share with your friends. And that's all I got. Remember that you are pretty, you are smart, and you are special, and I love you all very, very much. Peace and love. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Stop recording. Pro streamer. Stop recording.